Hi, we continue our discussion of tools related to text processing in Linux. So we've discussed so far such tools as sort, tr, and cut, and today we are taking a look at Uniq. As its name suggests, Uniq can be used to get unique lines from a given text file. So if some lines are repeated in our text file, we can filter them out and we only get the unique lines, but we can also do an opposite operation. For example, we care only about those repeated and duplicated lines. We can also use Uniq in this case, and Uniq could give us the repeated lines. It could also help us to show how many times given line is repeated in our text file. So there are more than one things that we can do with Uniq, and a lot of this has to do, as usual, with flags. So we have to take a look at the flags, what flags are available, how can we combine them, and so on. But that's a standard thing with all the tools that we've discussed so far. Uniq is not different in this case, and I think it's also one of the more beneficial tools. So maybe you wouldn't use it on a daily basis if you are a software engineer or if you are even someone that's working in IT, but definitely it has its use cases. And I have one personal story that I wanted to share. I work a lot with CFD data, so I deal with files that are huge, like hundreds of megabytes or maybe even gigabytes, huge. And most of those files are mostly numbers, but there are also some texts in those files, or maybe there are other files that we are using that contain some metadata for those files with real data in numbers. And one time I had some script in Python that was doing the real computation on those numbers in some way, but I also had to do some pre-processing, and this pre-processing consisted of sorting the data that I was given in some text files in a certain way. But the sorting was the first thing that I wanted to do, and also getting the unique values from the sorted results, because there were a lot of repetitions, and the computation could take a really long time. So in CFD, you can have a computation that takes hours or maybe even days to finish. So for sure, I didn't want to have any repetitions. And initially, I started to implement all this logic with sorting and filtering out the repetitions in Python itself. But even this initial part of preprocessing of text, first of all, it took me a lot of time to think about the logic itself, not a lot in terms of hours, but a couple of minutes just to get the initial thing done. And then when I tried to execute my script, it took this initial part, it took like more than a minute, sometimes maybe even more than 2 minutes. So for sure there could be some optimizations done there. But I would have to think about those optimizations first. I would have to figure out what can I do and then implement it. And it all takes time. And second of all, maybe more importantly, my script wasn't working all the time the way I expected it to work. So there were some errors in my logic. And of course, I could write tests, I could debug to check what was wrong, but I didn't have to reinvent the wheel. There were already tools that are available from the world of Linux, like sort and Uniq, that could do all the things that I tried to do myself, just with use of different flags, and they would do it correctly, and they would be much faster than the way I implemented it. So instead, I switched to initially to some bash script at the very beginning of my pipeline with computations, and I got correct results in a couple of I just had to tag two tools like sort and Uniq with a couple of flags, so just a single line of code, and nothing complicated, nothing fancy here, straightforward. And it even got much faster. So those things that took like more than a minute to compute, it would be computed almost instantly, like maybe in a second, 2 seconds, and so on. So there are those tools that are available. That's my point. And a lot of programmers or a lot of software engineers nowadays, either they are not aware that they exist or they don't want to use them because they consider them old and unuseful at our current age. But I think that just the opposite is true, because they were used already by so many people, and we still deal with text most of the time. We still have the same problems, like sorting, filtering out the duplicated values and so on. That's a thing that will be always there when we want to write our programs. So why don't use the tools that are available? I think that's the best way we could take. So going back to Uniq, let us take a look at the man page and see what exactly can we do with it. Let's open man on Uniq, and they tell us that it is used to report or omit repeated lines. So as I mentioned, if there are duplicate lines in your text, you can either filter them out, or you can just get the lines that are repeated, and both of those things are possible with Uniq. And the flags that we care about today is probably -c, the first one that they mention here, count prefix lines by the number of occurrences. So we can also count how many times the given line was repeated. And we can also ignore case, ignore differences in case when comparing. So let's say we have a file with many different words inside, like each line has a different word. And one time there is an apple, all uppercase, and one time apple written all lowercase. And maybe we want to consider both of those lines as separate lines. And we don't want Uniq to think that they're both the same, but maybe we want. And this flag can help us to tell Uniq exactly what we want to do. So we can ignore the case. We can, with -u, only print unique lines. So we are filtering out the repetitions. And what else do we have here? I think those three are the most important ones in terms of the problems that we are going to solve on the Hackerrank. So -u for unique values, -i for ignoring the differences in cases, and -c for counting the repetitions. Let's get to the first challenge. In this challenge, we practice using the Uniq command to eliminate consecutive repetitions of a line when a text file is piped through it. Given a text file, remove the consecutive repetitions of any line. So by default, it will only care about the repetitions that are consecutive, so one line after another. But you can, as I mentioned before, combine Uniq with sort, for example, to remove all the repetitions. So if, for example, one line is repeated multiple times across the file, but not one after another, you can first sort the file, then get rid of the repetitions and get all the lines, all the unique lines. Okay, so here we have some sample output and sample input and sample output to see what they want. For example, first is 0, 0 and 0, 0. So those first lines are repeated. And in the output, they want to see only the one line and the repetition. The repetition should be removed, should be filtered out. And then 0, 1 is also repeated, 0, 0 is also repeated. So all the lines are repeated, and they simply are getting rid of the consecutive repetitions. So those repetitions are filtered out. But for example, 0, 0 is it's at the very beginning. And then we have 0, 0 again. So in total 4 times in the input file. But it's here in our output, it appears 2 times. But because those two are not consecutive, they are not one after another, it's still fine. And that's the way Uniq works without any flags. So that's the default way. That's why probably they are giving us this problem as the first problem. And just for your information, if you are wanting to build, if you want to build some script with Uniq, you should be aware of this thing that by default it only cares about the repetitions that are one after another, so they are consecutive. And that's our simple input and output. There is no other example. So let's simply write Uniq, and it should suffice in this case because they want the default behavior. so we don't have to use any flag. And congratulations, everything seems fine. Let's submit the code and see if it works for every test case. And in this case, everything was correct. So let's go to the second challenge on Uniq. In this challenge, we practice using the Uniq command to eliminate consecutive repetitions of a line when a text file is piped through it. Given a text file, count the number of times each line repeats itself. Only consider consecutive repetitions. Display the spaces separated, count, and align respectively. There shouldn't be any leading or trailing spaces. Please note that the Uniq -c command, so this -c flag we've already mentioned, that it can be used to count how many times each line is repeated, and they even show us the solution to the problem in the problem description itself. And they only mention that this command by itself will generate the output in a different format than the one expected here. So let's see what they expect. So CL 00, 00, 01, and so on. Similar example to the one before. And they are displaying here first the number of repetitions and then the line itself. And that's the default behavior of this count with -c flag, that it only considers the consecutive repetitions of lines. So for example, this line 00 is repeated 4 times, but we don't care about it by default. We only care about consecutive repetitions, so that's why there is 2 here, and the 00 is repeated again here, and again 2 times, so that's why there is this 2. So each time we have the number of repetitions, but only for the consecutive lines. So let's see what count with -c will give us. And they've already made a small spoiler that it is not a correct solution. And what it is, not count. What I meant, not count Uniq -c. -c is for counting, but the tool itself is unique, but it's still wrong. Here is our output. There is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces that we have to get rid of in order to get the expected output. Well, that's the way Uniq works by default, and we can simply use another tool. In this case, we can use cut, the tool that we know, and we've mentioned already in this channel in our previous episodes when we solved the challenges from Hackerrank related to this tool, that we can cut simply the first 7 characters, and in this case -c has a different meaning. -c means character, and in the case of Uniq it means count. So here we care only about the characters from 7th onward, so the first 6 should be removed. And let's see if it works. So this time everything is fine. Let's submit the code. And that's how we can remove the leading white spaces. If the leading white spaces wouldn't be always the same, so let's say sometimes you would have 10, and sometimes you would have 8 or 7 leading white spaces, then you would have to do something else. But in this case, it always shows exactly 6 leading white spaces, so we can use cut to remove them and hard code this number. So let's see the next challenge. We've already covered 2, and the third challenge is as follows. Given a text file, count the number of times each line repeats itself. Only consider consecutive repetitions, so still the same as the second challenge. Display the count and the line separated by space, the same as in the previous challenge. There shouldn't be leading or trailing spaces, okay, still the same. Please note that Uniq -c command by itself will generate the output in a different format. So that's, I guess it's copy-pasted from the previous challenge. And here is some new part. This time, compare consecutive lines in a case-sensitive manner. A case insensitive. Yeah, by default is sensitive, and we want to make it insensitive. So if a line X is followed by case variants, the output should count all of them as the same, but display only the form X in the second column. So as you might observe in the case below, AA lowercase and AA is uppercase, and A uppercase and the lowercase are all considered as instances of AA. Let's see. Here they have this example, and it's counted they are both instances of AA. Okay, so we've already covered the man page, and we know that there is a simple flag that can take care of this case sensitivity stuff. So what do we want? We still want Uniq -c for counting lines, and we want to combine it with I flag for making it case insensitive. That should take care of it, and we still want to cut the leading white spaces, so we only care about characters from the 7th character onward. And let's see if that's the thing that we want. And in fact, it works. So it's the same as the previous task, they only wanted an additional flag. And the last task for today is the 4th challenge on Uniq. Given a text file, display only those lines which are not followed or preceded by identical replications. So as I mentioned before, we can use Uniq to either filter out duplicates or to show the duplicates. Maybe that's the thing that we want. In this case, we want exactly that. So let's see here. This line is not repeated. If you would use -I flag, then it would be repeated, because then it would treat it. It would simply ignore this case sensitivity. But by default, and they didn't mention that we should change the default here, they would be treated as different lines. So they are also here in output, and they are not removed, and that's the case here. The next line are all repeated, so we don't see them in output, and the next line that's not repeated is this and that, and all other lines are still repeated. So everything works the way we expect it to work. And what can we do to get unique lines? We simply use -u flag that we've learned about in our mem. And it works just fine. That's it for today. As with other tools, it's really beneficial to learn about the flags. And if you know about the most used flags, the flags that are used in most cases, you shouldn't have any problems with those challenges.